All right, today we're diving into a pretty fascinating claim that's been making the rounds online. It's this whole idea of redeeming lawful money to get your income tax back.
I mean, just think about that for a second. That's the powerful promise at the heart of the theory we're breaking down today. The idea is that there's some kind of legal process, maybe hidden in plain sight, that could let you reclaim every single dollar withheld for federal income tax.
So let's get right into it. Our goal here is pretty simple. We're just going to walk you through the arguments and the instructions exactly as they're presented in the source material. We'll break down the logic, the legal stuff they cite, and the whole step-by-step process they lay out. Now, it is absolutely crucial that we start where the source itself starts, and that's with a big disclaimer. The video is very clear that this information is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and that it is not legal advice. They say you should talk to a lawyer or an accountant for that.
Okay, so to really understand this whole thing, we have to start at square one, with the most fundamental piece of the puzzle. What do they even mean by lawful money?
According to them, lawful money is defined very, very specifically. It's not the cash you have in your wallet. Instead, it's currency that supposedly comes directly from the U.S. Treasury. Things like gold and silver coins or treasury notes.
And this is where they draw a really sharp line in the sand. On one side, you've got their idea of lawful money, which they argue is backed by actual physical reserves like gold and silver. And on the other side, you've got what they call fiat money, the Federal Reserve notes we all use, which they say only has value because the government says so.
And right here, this is the core of their entire argument. The dollar bill, they say, isn't money itself. It's just legal tender, which they see as basically a coupon, a promise that you can redeem for the real thing, which is that lawful money.
So you might be wondering, where on earth does this idea even come from? Well, let's take a look at the legal and historical stuff the source uses to try and build its case.
This quote they use really captures the whole philosophy. It's attributed to J.P. Morgan, and it basically argues that only tangible things, like gold, are real money. Everything else we use, including the dollar, is just a form of credit or debt.
Their argument is built on their own unique interpretation of a bunch of legal texts. They point to specific sections of the U.S. Code, the original Federal Reserve Act, parts of the Constitution about gold and silver, and even something called the Uniform Commercial Code. This is the foundation they claim for all this. And this is the phrase that's absolutely central to their whole process. It's from the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Their entire theory hinges on interpreting this line to mean that any Federal Reserve note is a promise from the Treasury that you can trade in for lawful money.
Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this supposedly work in the real world? Let's start with the first application they talk about, filing your taxes. The source gives very, very specific instructions. They say you go to Schedule 1 on your Form 1040, find the line for other income, and then, and this is the wild part, you enter your total gross income for the year as a negative number. Then you write demand for lawful money right beside it. So for example, if you made $50,000, you'd literally write it as negative $50,000. The logic they present is that you aren't actually reporting income. You're redeeming the legal tender for its value in lawful money, which in their view zeroes out your taxable income. And what's the promised result of doing this? They claim you'll get a full refund of every single dollar that was withheld for federal taxes that year. And they go even further, claiming that after you do it once, you'll get 100% of your withholdings back every year from then on. Now, the process they describe doesn't stop with tax forms. It actually extends into your everyday banking transactions too. Let's see how that works. According to the source, when you get a check or you're making a deposit, you don't just sign your name. They instruct you to write out specific phrases like redeeming lawful money, sign your name in red ink, and then add another phrase that references the Uniform Commercial Code. And a really key part of this whole thing is keeping records. The source is adamant that you have to make copies of everything, every single check you endorse, every pay stub you annotate, to submit with your tax forms as proof that you've been redeeming lawful money all year. They even give you advice on how to handle yourself at the bank. The instructions are basically to act cool, like you do this every day. Keep it simple, and if a teller happens to ask about all the extra writing on your check, you just say, "It's for tax recording purposes," and that's it. You leave it at that. So what's the ultimate point of all this? I mean, why go through all these very specific, unusual steps? Well, the source frames it as something much, much bigger than just a tax refund. In their own words, this is not just some financial trick. It is, and I quote, your path to freedom. The motivation they present is really a philosophical one.
The whole process is laid out as this completely lawful way to just opt out of the financial system we're all a part of, a system they see as based on illegitimate fiat currency. The stated goal is to achieve true financial independence, or sovereignty.
So, we've walked through the claims, the legal reasoning they give, and the very specific instructions, all as presented by the source. They frame this as a key to financial liberty, which, you have to admit, leaves us with a pretty fascinating question. What happens when an individual's personal interpretation of the law, no matter how strongly they believe it, goes up against a massive, complex system that was designed for everyone to follow the same set of rules? That's definitely something to think about.